You know, sometimes a story hits differently when a specific voice speaks up, like Nobel laureate Malala Yousafzai.
Mm-hmm.
She's recently spoken out, quite forcefully actually, about Pakistan deporting large numbers of Afghan refugees.
Yeah, particularly focusing on the women and girls. She's called for it to stop immediately.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, we really want to try and understand what's going on from, well, multiple angles.
Right. We've got Malala's statements and then the response from Pakistan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as reported by Afghanistan International.
So the mission here is really to get into the different arguments, the core perspectives in this. Well, it's a really difficult situation.
It is, and you see the tension straight away, don't you, between like the immediate human costs Malala is highlighting and Pakistan's arguments about national pressures?
Yeah, it makes you think about the bigger picture, beyond just the headlines.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's start with Malala's side. Her criticism seems very, very direct.
Very direct. And her focus is laser sharp on the human impact, right? Especially for Afghan women and girls.
She's saying that if they're deported, they lose access to things we consider just basic, like education, like the right to work.
Which are fundamental rights. And her argument is deporting them essentially denies them these rights. Think about the long-term impact of that.
It's huge, isn't it? If you deny education, especially to girls, what does that do to a society down the line?
Well, history shows it can really hold back development, limit social progress. It can even feed into instability. So Malala's concern isn't just immediate, it's looking ahead too.
And she doesn't mince words about where they're being sent back to.
No, she doesn't. Calling the Taliban regime a cruel gender apartheid regime, that's incredibly strong language.
It really frames the danger she sees. Her point is, Afghanistan just isn't safe right now, particularly if you're female.
And she points out many of these families fled the Taliban's violence in the first place.
Right. So it's not just moving somewhere else. It's potentially being forced back into the very danger they escaped. Imagine that.
Exactly. And think about the psychological toll. They're already refugees, likely carrying trauma. Forcing them back could just deepen that significantly.
It's not just about physical safety, then. It's mental well-being, too.
Absolutely, which is why she appeals to the international community, you know, asking for protection, for more resettlement options.
She seems to be saying this responsibility shouldn't just fall on Pakistan alone.
That seems to be a core part of her message, yes.
Okay, so shifting gears then. Let's look at Pakistan's response. They do acknowledge her concerns, which is, well, it's something.
It is. They acknowledge it, but then almost in the same breath, they ask her for a list of the most at-risk Afghans.
What's the play there, do you think?
Well, maybe it's a way to show they are considering individual cases, the really extreme ones, perhaps, while still moving forward with the overall policy.
A kind of targeted approach.
Possibly. But their main argument, the big one, is about the sheer burden they've carried for so long.
Yeah, they emphasize hosting over 4 million Afghan refugees.
Over 4 decades. That's a massive number and a huge time span. They portray it as this enormous global humanitarian effort they've shouldered.
And now they're saying, essentially, enough is enough.
Pretty much. They argue it's just not sustainable anymore. The pressure on their own resources is immense.
They put a figure on it, don't they? Something like over $200 million a year.
That's the number they cite, yes. Plus the strain on infrastructure, healthcare, especially in those border provinces like Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan.
The places that have absorbed most of the refugees historically.
Exactly. So it's the economic cost, but also the social service strain.
And then they add another layer. Security concerns.
Right. They allege that some Afghan citizens have been involved in things like smuggling, even terrorist activities.
Which, for any government, is a major justification point, isn't it? National security is always priority number one.
It is, and it's an argument that likely resonates domestically.
Now, here's where it gets interesting. Their justification gets a bit more complex. They point to a UN report.
Yeah, a UNAMA report. They say it suggests security has actually improved in many parts of Afghanistan, especially rural areas.
So their logic is the original reason for fleeing might not apply anymore for some people, making return okay.
That seems to be the implication they're drawing from it. That return is now a feasible option for many.
Which brings us to the legal side of things. This is tricky.
Very tricky. They state that even though they didn't sign the main international agreement, the 1951 Refugee Convention.
They believe what they're doing is still within international law.
Correct. Their interpretation is that international law only stops you sending people back if they face specific rights, and they claim they are respecting that principle.
But what does that actually mean if you're not a signatory? What rules do apply?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? While the 51 Convention sets out clear rules for signatories, there's also this concept of customary international law.
Like the principle of non-refoulement, not sending people back to danger.
Exactly. That principle is widely seen as binding on all states, signed up or not. But Pakistan's argument seems to hinge on how you define danger or specific threat in today's Afghanistan.
So there's definitely room for interpretation there.
Huge room, and that's where the core disagreement lies, partly.
Okay, so let's try and pull these threads together. We have Malala focusing intensely on the human rights aspect, the immediate danger, especially for women and girls facing the Taliban.
Yeah, the vulnerability, the potential for abuse, the loss of rights.
And then on the other side, Pakistan is emphasizing, look, decades of pressure, national resources stretched thin, security issues.
And they maintain they're acting within their rights, legally and humanely, as they see it.
Both sides are rooted in really serious concerns, aren't they? Malala in these fundamental human rights principles.
In Pakistan, in the practical, often harsh realities of managing a massive long-term refugee situation alongside their own national challenges.
It really highlights this fundamental tension. So for listeners trying to make sense of this, it seems to boil down to this clash, right?
The urgent need to protect people fleeing harm versus the real-world pressures and limits faced by the countries that host them.
So thinking about everything we've just discussed,
Yeah.
the immediate risks, the long-term strains, what kind of solutions could even begin to address displacement crises like this? Long-term solutions that are both ethical and sustainable on a global scale.
That's the critical question, isn't it? There are no easy answers, but it definitely requires looking beyond just the immediate crisis or the actions of one country. It needs serious global thought.